What's going on, everybody, and welcome to, what is this, the 17th, maybe the 18th Wheel of Time diary, something along those lines. Actually getting pretty far into this thing. This is, I don't know, the 5th or 6th one of these diaries for The Shadow Rising. I'm thinking it's the 5th. I spent a little over 5 hours reading this week, about 5.25 hours, and truth be told, I'm running this one off of no notes at all because I did not write down my normal chapter like thoughts or whatever after all of the chapters that I read this week, which for the record were chapters 31 through 37 of The Shadow Rising. And the reason I didn't write anything down was because I just didn't really have much to say in the moments after finishing reading them. Plus, I had to rush a little bit to get some of these chapters read this week. I did not read very much over the actual weekend. I was catching up in the middle of the week, which I normally don't have to do with this series at this point with my current reading schedule. So things have just been going a little bit weird. So because I wrote nothing down, I don't really remember off the top of my head what really happened this week. There's some things that I can remember, some things that I remember a little bit more, just kind of very quickly scanning through the book itself a little bit. But overall, yeah, that I'm winging it a little bit more this week than I suppose I normally would be. For spoiler free, I will say this was one of the more uneventful weeks with the reading. I mean, there was a couple big things that sort of happened in the reading now that I kind of think about it a little bit more, but nothing of it felt like super incredibly major the way that like last week there was a couple things that felt, rather like big, important moments, including, the Ruidian sequence, which a lot of people think is peak of the series, and which is, has a lot of really cool and really like big implications for the series. And at the very least, has some big revelations that otherwise would not have been made. But moving into what I read this week, I suppose I might as well just start with the spoiler free. Most of what I remember from reading this week is really the last few chapters of this specific part of Perrin's plotline, where he goes through and with a few people, with, the Aes Sedai, with the Warders, with, Tam and Abel Coffin, and with some of these other characters, go into the White Cloak camp and save some of the prisoners, which I forget exactly who was actually in that prisoner camp, so to speak, but there was a couple chapters focused on getting these characters to that camp, which included staying at the place of, a group of farmers along the way, as well as, talking to a bunch of other farmers and other people along the way as well, basically saying, hey, if you want to survive this, and if you want to be okay, if you want your family to be okay, you should go to the Two Rivers. All of you should group up together because that's the best way and easiest way and the best, most straightforward way to resist against the White Cloaks if they decide to do something bad against you for some reason. So I think these chapters, really what they showcased mostly was Perrin's leadership ability, the way that he just kind of naturally takes forward position, and the way that people don't need that much convincing from him when, otherwise they would maybe put up a fierce argument. I think this might have a little bit to do, at least in part, with, Freudian slip, with Perrin's wolf abilities, that maybe him being this wolf figure kind of gives him this sort of edge in conversation to make him a little bit more convincing to people. That might be an aspect of it. That might be what Jordan was trying to explore. But then we go into the sequence where he frees the people from the White Cloak camp, which is quite an exciting sequence. Not really too much to report other than he got people out, and he intends to take himself and some of the men and go hunt some Trollocs afterwards. So now that he's freed some people, he wants to do some sort of taking revenge, it seems like. I don't know, it's kind of a weird implication at the end of that chapter there, but that was, I don't know, 3 or 4 chapters of what I read this week. That was, finishing out that little bit of the Perrin plotline, and I enjoyed that bit of it. Next, what I read was mostly the Rand, Matt, and, well, it was all Rand, Matt, and Egwene, but it was mostly Rand and Matt with one chapter of Egwene in the middle there. the first thing that I'll say about like chapter 34, the chapter called He Who Comes with the Dawn, is I wish this chapter would have followed directly after the two Ruidian chapters from before. So instead of doing the two Ruidian chapters where Rand experiences all of this past stuff and then, saving essentially Matt's life at the very end, I wish it hadn't cut from them leaving Ruidian to, like 8 chapters or whatever it was of Perrin plotline, and then coming back to chapter 34. 34 I feel like would have suited a lot better if it just followed immediately afterwards. I think some of what it places down, including the fact that Rand and Matt were gone for 7 days or something like that, and, revealing that nobody who goes through Ruidian comes back after 10 days. That's just kind of the way that things have gone. I wish like some of this stuff had happened directly after the actual Ruidian sequence, because I think it would have solidified and set some of that stuff in stone for me in a way that was more, similar to the way that everybody else talks about that sequence as being the best of the series. I actually had a lot more appreciation for those 2 chapters because of this one, so I kind of wish they were a little bit closer together, rather than, like I said, having like 8 chapters of Perrin plotline in between, and some of that, Perrin plotline having some of the worst material in the series up to this point. But I'm not going to complain too much. It was a very good chapter. I'm forgetting exactly what it was that people discussed, but I really enjoyed chapter 34. Like I said, I don't remember specifics of what exactly happened in the chapter besides, Matt and Rand coming back and learning like little tidbits of information and talking with the wise ones a little bit. But I enjoyed the chapter for what it was nonetheless quite a bit. At least I remember it fondly. The next chapter, 35, jumps to Egwene's POV, where she's entering into Tel'aran'rhiod, apparently against the permission of the Wise Ones, and, at the end of the chapter, she essentially gets a beating, so to speak, from the Wise Ones, telling her, like, you swore that you would not enter Tel'aran'rhiod alone, and, there's a whole argument associated with that, but this Tel'aran'rhiod sequence is Egwene searching for and talking with Elaine on the other side of the world, heading towards Tanchico, and I enjoyed this segment. I've really enjoyed all of Egwene and even Elaine's plot lines up to this point. I've not had any issues with them, and especially all the Aes Sedai stuff. I would say all the Aes Sedai stuff in general I've not really taken issue with in the series so far. I've just kind of felt it's all been good quality, especially since, basically all of the Aes Sedai related stuff has been main characters, so that probably has a little bit to do with it, but I've enjoyed what everything has been nonetheless. The only aspect of this chapter that I would say I'm a little bit worried about is I think it introduces the first of what may very well be many miscommunication plot lines, or at least plot lines and character interactions and relationships that are affected by and effectively molded by a sense of miscommunication, because at the very end of this chapter, Elaine is trying to tell Egwene before she is snapped awake and out of, Tel'aran'rhiod, that Elaine presumably was going to say to tell Rand that she meant what she wrote. Good grief, English is hard right now. She meant what she wrote in presumably the first letter that she sent to Rand before leaving, because Elaine sent Rand 2 letters, or gave him 2 letters, and the first one was sweet and endearing and, good things, apparently, and the second one was very not, was the exact opposite, because Rand kind of refused to, be sensible, I guess, or at least sensible in Elaine's eyes. So, presumably, Elaine was going to tell Egwene to tell Rand that she meant what she meant in the first letter, but she snapped out of Tel'aran'rhiod just in time to only hear "tell Rand I meant what I said" in basically, essentially those words. So Egwene assumes in both letters. And so this kind of sets off a plot line over the next couple chapters that are starting with, people, including Egwene, telling Aviendha to tell Rand, because Aviendha in the next couple chapters becomes essentially like, is forced to be on Rand's side for, ever, basically, just to kind of keep an eye on him, it seems. And Aviendha says this is just like, Elaine meant everything she said in those letters, and you better believe it. But Rand refuses to tell them that, well, those 2 letters were contradictory, so what is it? Like, why are you telling me this? And just kind of holds that to himself. So it kind of creates this sort of like tension between characters that I feel like is kind of needless. It's not necessarily too annoying. It's not getting on my nerves or anything. I just think it's weird and doesn't really matter, and I think will only get worse. So it might get annoying or tedious later, but it is kind of a strange decision, all things considered. Otherwise, I only read 2 more chapters after this, chapters 36 and 37, and truth be told, even kind of scanning a little bit through these chapters, I'm not fully confident I remember like what happened in them. All I really remember is that the party from, the Rudian sequence, that, all the Aiel side of stuff, is traveling towards someplace else in the waste. Is it the waste? Is it the waste that they're at? It's something like that. I might be forgetting things. Yeah, that does seem to be the case. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that all I really remember from these 2 chapters is a lot of traveling, and at the very end being attacked. The group is attacked by Trollocs and Fades in the middle of the Aiel waste, where Trollocs and Fades would never otherwise be found. So basically all I know at this point is that there's something kind of weird going on in this travels, but otherwise I don't actually fully remember what these travels are for, where it is exactly they're going, and why. I don't know why none of these things I can remember even scanning through, but that is certainly what is happening right now. So if anybody wants to enlighten me, you certainly can in the comments below, because I do not remember at the moment regardless, but that is essentially what I got through. That is where I stopped. I was actually going to get a little bit further this week, but work plans kind of changed a few days ago, so I wasn't able to get a couple chapters ahead like I wanted to. But where I am now is chapter 38, and this finally picks up with Elaine and Nynaeve and, the Tanchico plotline again. It doesn't seem like it carries on for very long based off of just like very, surface level scanning of a few of the next chapters, which is disappointing. I want to get a little bit more of this plotline, but since I am excited to come back to this one, I'm excited to come back to this one. So I will be doing that, presumably over this weekend by the time I record the next one of these. Oh man. How do I do mental math? This is, very unbecoming. I believe where I need to be. I can't remember for sure, but I believe where I need to be, where I'm going to be by the time I record the next one of these, is somewhere around chapter 46. I think that's how math works, but I'm a little bit too tired to be able to do it off the top of my head. So in order to, stay caught up with where I need to be, I believe I'll be getting up to somewhere around chapter 46, give or take a couple chapters, hopefully a little bit further than that, so I can guarantee, being able to finish this book on time. But that is approximately what I'm going to try to get through over the next week, is chapters 38 through 45 or so. So if you're following along, that should be approximately what I cover next week. Of course, you'll know more next week when I actually do the next one of these videos. But thank you for watching, and I apologize for my probably worse ramblings than normal, just because, I didn't actually take solid notes on any of this stuff. But thank you for watching regardless. I'll be back in the next video.